You need to watch this if you crave chills down your spine. Welcome to Soul Studios. Here, true crime meets the unknown. Suspense lurks in every shadow, and supernatural forces whisper from the dark. We craft chilling, edge-of-your-seat short stories inspired by the eerie, the unexplained, and the most haunting mysteries. 3 new stories drop every week, each one darker than the last. Are you ready to step inside? Subscribe now before the next story finds you.
In 1989, a couple set out to celebrate their wedding anniversary with a daring skydiving trip, an adventure meant to mark their love in the most unforgettable way. But when the jump began, something went horribly wrong. What followed was a shocking tragedy that stunned everyone on the ground and left investigators scrambling for answers. As the case unfolded, dark secrets began to surface, hidden relationships, financial motives, and choices that no one could have predicted. For decades, whispers and rumors surrounded what really happened in the skies that day, until a revelation years later redefined the entire story. If you crave chilling true crime tales with twists you'll never see coming, subscribe to Soul Studios and hit the bell icon, because the next story might just be the one that keeps you up tonight. On a crisp autumn afternoon in 1989, a small Cessna aircraft circled high above rural Maple Falls, a quiet town that would soon be shaken by an unimaginable tragedy. Down on the ground, a team of skydiving instructors shielded their eyes from the sun, watching in mounting horror as a lone figure plummeted from 12,000 feet without a functioning parachute. It was supposed to be a joyous wedding anniversary skydive for John and Diane Kramer, a daring celebration of love. Instead, it became a nightmare freefall. When investigators later examined the failed parachute, they found chilling evidence that this was no accident. Critical parachute lines had been deliberately cut. What began as a romantic anniversary thrill ride was about to transform into a decades-long cold case of love, betrayal, and murder. And the most shocking secret of all, it hid in plain sight until a twist ending no one saw coming. John and Diane Kramer were, by all outward appearances, a picture-perfect couple. John, 32, was a mild-mannered accountant, diligent, kind, and a little adventurous at heart. Diane, 29, was vivacious and headstrong, with a taste for excitement that belied her small-town upbringing. They had met 5 years earlier at a county fair and married after a whirlwind romance. Neighbors in Maple Falls would often see them holding hands on evening walks and smiling at each other on Sunday church pews. So when the Kramers announced they'd be skydiving to celebrate their anniversary, friends thought it was just another of their fun-loving escapades. But behind closed doors, fault lines had begun to form in the Kramer marriage. John's co-workers recalled him working late more often, looking tired and distracted. A close friend of Diane's noticed she'd grown oddly distant from John in recent months. She'd make excuses to spend time away and had developed a sudden obsession with skydiving, even taking solo jump classes on weekends. John, less enthusiastic about heights, found himself going along with Diane's anniversary adventure mainly to make her happy. If John had any reservations or fears about the jump, he swallowed them for the sake of their celebration. Unbeknownst to him, this decision would nearly cost him his life. On October 21st, 1989, the Kramers' 5th anniversary, the couple arrived at Skydive Maple Falls, a small airfield outside town. The autumn sun was golden, the air brisk. Diane was unusually upbeat and affectionate that day. She clung to John's arm, peppering him with kisses and laughter, as if trying to banish any of his nerves. Observers later recalled Diane's excitement seemed almost manic. John, by contrast, had a nervous smile, repeatedly checking the straps of his parachute harness. He even joked with the instructor, "Make sure to double-check mine. I want to live to tell the tale." It was meant to calm his own jitters. No one realized how prophetic that joke would become. Inside the hangar, 2 parachute rigs sat ready, one for John, one for Diane. They were standard skydiving rigs with a main chute and a reserve chute, each packed earlier that morning. Diane had arrived to the airfield early to handle the paperwork, she said. But in reality, she had insisted on preparing the gear herself. She claimed she wanted everything to be perfect for their special jump. A few employees found it odd. Typically, only certified riggers packed chutes. But Diane was persuasive and said she'd had training from her recent lessons. In truth, as investigators later determined, Diane used that alone time to tamper with John's parachute pack. She knew exactly what she was doing. Lines were deftly sliced, and a vital connector in the reserve parachute's deployment system was removed, ensuring that if the main failed, the backup would fail too. It was a silent death trap, carefully hidden beneath layers of nylon. At 3:15 p.m., John and Diane boarded the rickety Cessna along with an instructor pilot. As the plane climbed into a wide holding pattern above the drop zone, John's heart pounded with adrenaline and anxiety. Diane was all smiles, shouting over the engine noise that she loved him. John shouted back that this was the best anniversary ever, despite the butterflies in his stomach. He would later recall a peculiar moment as they hit jump altitude. Diane reached over and squeezed his hand tightly, her face almost solemn now. "You ready?" she asked. John nodded, though he noticed her gaze drift briefly to his parachute pack. He couldn't know it, but that was Diane's moment of truth, her last chance to call off the plan. The signal was given at 12,000 feet. Diane and John, both doing solo jumps, shuffled to the open door as frigid wind whipped into the cabin. Diane insisted on jumping after John. "Anniversary boys first," she teased with a wink. It struck John as odd. Originally, she had said she wanted to go first because she was the pro now. But in the rush of the moment, he didn't question it. At 3:30 p.m., John took a deep breath and leapt into the void. The sensation was electric. For a minute, John's fear evaporated into an exhilarating freefall over a panorama of patchwork fields. He whooped with joy, Diane hollering back from the plane, her voice faint against the roaring wind. A few seconds later, Diane jumped out after him. Two dark specks against the blue sky, husband and wife hurtled earthward, their altimeters ticking down. At 4,000 feet, John reached to deploy his parachute cord. The canopy unfurled properly above him with a loud flap, jolting him as it caught air. Relief and triumph flooded John's chest as he began to drift gently, alive and well, ready to congratulate his wife on this wild adventure. But then he realized something was wrong, terribly wrong. Below him and to the west, Diane was falling too fast. John squinted in confusion. He could see her silhouette struggling, arms flailing. Her main parachute was not out. 5 seconds, 10 seconds. Diane fought to deploy her reserve chute. From John's vantage, it looked like a small pilot chute finally popped out, but then it just fluttered away uselessly. No canopy. "Pull the reserve, Diane! Pull it!" John screamed into the empty air, helpless. Diane's body tumbled end over end, a ragdoll against the endless sky. In those final harrowing moments, the realization must have hit her. Her parachutes were never going to open. At 3:32 p.m., Diane slammed into a fallow cornfield beyond the drop zone at nearly 100 miles per hour. The impact was fatal on contact. John, still suspended under his parachute, watched in absolute shock and horror as his wife hit the earth. His jubilant laughter just seconds before had morphed into a primal scream.
No!
Neighbors miles away reported hearing a terrible shriek echoing across the sky. John hit the ground roughly but safely a few hundred yards from Diane's lifeless body. He tore off his harness and ran, stumbling, to where she lay. Diane was unresponsive, broken beyond help. John fell to his knees in the mud beside his wife, wailing her name. Paramedics arrived within minutes. The Skydive Club had already called 911 when they saw a chute fail. But it was far too late. Diane Kramer, a beloved wife and friend, was pronounced dead at the scene. What should have been a celebration had turned into an unthinkable tragedy. The initial assumption was equipment malfunction. Skydiving accidents happen, though rarely, but 2 parachutes failing on one jump? The odds of both a main and reserve chute failing are astronomically low. Veteran instructors on site were baffled and deeply disturbed. As police cordoned off the area, one of the skydive staff cautiously approached them with something he'd found. Diane's reserve ripcord lying yards away, detached cleanly from her rig. It wasn't torn out by force. It looked as if it had been removed on purpose. Investigators recovered Diane's parachute pack and discovered further disturbing anomalies. The pilot chute, a small chute that yanks out the main canopy, had been detached from the main parachute entirely, and a key line meant to connect the reserve chute to her harness was cleanly severed. These were clear signs of sabotage. They could not have happened by accident. The field that day quickly went from an accident scene to a crime scene. John was in hysterics as officers tried to question him. One detective noted that amid his frantic sobbing, John kept repeating, "It was supposed to be me. It was supposed to be me." This cryptic statement wouldn't make sense until much later. At that moment, investigators assumed it was the shock talking. John was taken to the hospital for evaluation. He'd sustained a minor ankle fracture on landing, and then to the police station for a formal statement. In the days following Diane's death, Maple Falls police launched a full investigation. Very quickly, the spotlight of suspicion turned toward John, the sole survivor. It's investigative instinct 101. When a spouse dies under strange circumstances, look hard at the other spouse. Could John have sabotaged Diane's parachute, intending to kill his wife and make it appear an accident? Detectives dug into the Kramers' lives for any hint of motive. What they found initially was modest and ordinary. Average bills, a mortgage, no children, no obvious financial woes. John had a small life insurance policy on Diane, but nothing out of the ordinary. In fact, Diane stood to gain more if John died due to a larger policy through his job. Investigators did note something odd. Just 2 months earlier, that policy on John had been significantly increased at Diane's urging, doubling the payout to nearly $500,000. When questioned, a grief-stricken John insisted he didn't know why Diane was so keen on more insurance. She had said it was for future security. To detectives, this was a red flag that raised the possibility of an entirely different scenario. Was John the intended victim all along? As forensic technicians combed over the parachute evidence, their findings supported that theory. They confirmed that someone had expertly sabotaged one of the parachute rigs. But here's the twist. It appeared the tampered rig was meant for John. The markings and packing notes suggested the faulty parachute pack was the one assigned to John prior to the jump. John's own parachute, the one he had worn and landed with, checked out perfectly fine and intact. This meant that at some point before or during the flight, John and Diane's parachute packs had been swapped. The investigators were stunned by the implication. If John had secretly switched the rigs to kill his wife, it would mean he knowingly gave her a sabotaged parachute, a chilling act of premeditated murder. But if not John, then the only person who could have engineered this deadly switch was Diane herself, intending to kill John, only to fall victim to her own plot. Detective Maria Sanchez, leading the case, found herself at a perplexing crossroads. On one hand, John was visibly devastated, and by all accounts a mild-mannered man with no history of violence. On the other, Diane had a secret life that was just beginning to surface. As police interviewed friends and colleagues, a troubling picture emerged. Diane had been having an affair. A co-worker revealed that Diane often spoke of someone named Michael, a friend from her skydiving class. Another witness reported seeing Diane meeting a tall man in a car at a diner outside town, embracing intimately. The pieces were coming together. Diane was involved in a love triangle, and her lover Michael had allegedly been urging her to start a new life. When detectives tracked down Michael Jennings, a local skydiving instructor, he initially denied any involvement with Diane beyond friendship. But confronted with phone records, Diane had been calling him daily from a secret second phone. Michael broke down. He admitted to the affair and revealed that Diane felt trapped in her marriage to John. She had hinted to Michael that she wished John wasn't around anymore. Michael claimed he thought she was speaking figuratively. He never imagined she'd actually plot to kill her husband. Crucially, Michael denied any role in sabotaging the parachute, and there was no hard evidence tying him directly to the rigging. He had an alibi at the time the chutes were packed, teaching a class across town. It appeared Diane acted alone in the sabotage plan, hoping to eliminate John, collect his insurance, and run off with her lover. It was a motive straight out of a crime novel: kill the husband, cash in, and start fresh with a new lover. As one prosecutor later summarized, Diane's plan was as cold-blooded as it was tragic. She intended to begin a new life with her secret lover and a hefty insurance payout. By early 1990, the case presented to the county grand jury painted Diane Kramer as the would-be murderer, and a bizarre twist of fate as the cause of her death. Investigators theorized that Diane sabotaged the parachute rig labeled for John. They believed John inadvertently, or perhaps suspiciously, ended up wearing Diane's untouched parachute, leaving the tampered one for Diane. Faced with the evidence of Diane's affair and the rigged gear, prosecutors considered the possibility that John might have realized something was wrong and switched the parachutes intentionally, effectively turning Diane's murderous scheme against her. However, John vehemently denied such an accusation. He maintained that in the chaos before the jump, he grabbed the nearest parachute handed to him by an airfield assistant, not realizing it wasn't the one originally set aside for him. In his version, the swap that saved his life was a morbid coincidence, a twist of fate, not a conscious act. With Diane, the primary culprit, dead and John's involvement unclear, the authorities struggled with how to proceed. Ultimately, no murder charges were filed. Diane could not answer for her actions, and there was insufficient evidence to prove John had intended to kill his wife. The death was officially ruled a homicide, Diane being the victim of her own murderous plot. A case of death by misadventure, as the coroner grimly put it. The file was shelved as a closed case of attempted murder-suicide, since Diane essentially caused her own death in attempting to kill John, though some investigators still harbored nagging doubts about John's story. Was it really just chance that he ended up with the good parachute? Or had he suspected his wife's treachery at the last second and made the switch, choosing to let her die in his place? John's haunting words at the scene, "It was supposed to be me," took on a new light. Had he meant that he was the intended victim all along? Or was it a burdened confession that he knew she was about to take the fall, meant for him? John Kramer left Maple Falls soon after the investigation concluded. Hounded by local gossip and his own trauma, he quit his job, sold the house, and disappeared from public view. For years, the story of the Kramers' anniversary skydive circulated in hushed whispers, a chilling cautionary tale of marital betrayal. The final shocking twist to this already bizarre case would only emerge decades later. In 2019, 30 years after that fateful jump, a frail, retired detective, Maria Sanchez, sat down with John Kramer for a filmed interview as part of a cold case documentary. John, now in his 60s, had never remarried and had kept to himself all these years. On camera, his face lined with sorrow, John made a stunning admission. He had switched the parachutes with Diane on that plane. On the verge of the jump, John said he noticed frayed stitching on the shoulder of the rig he'd been given, the one Diane had prepared for him. A gut feeling told him something was wrong. In those final seconds, while Diane was momentarily distracted, John unbuckled and quietly swapped the parachute packs, securing the other rig onto himself. He said he wasn't entirely sure why he did it, call it intuition or a last-minute panic, but that he simply did not trust the parachute his wife handed him. When asked if he understood the consequence of that swap, John grew quiet. Through tears, he finally responded, "I loved Diane. I never wanted her hurt. I wasn't going to be the one to die that day." It's an answer that raises almost as many questions as it resolves. John's revelation recontextualized every odd detail from that day. Diane's giddy cheer masking her deadly intent, her insistence that John go first, not realizing he was now wearing the safe chute. and John's own inexplicable stroke of foresight. Legally, John could not be charged after all these years. Double jeopardy and lack of new prosecutable evidence saw to that. Detective Sanchez remarked in the documentary that, in her heart, she believes John suspected the sabotage when he saw that frayed strap, whether consciously or subconsciously, and made a split-second decision that likely saved his life. Whether John's act was one of self-preservation or cold calculation will forever remain partly ambiguous. Did he outright recognize his wife's murderous plan and choose to sacrifice her instead? Or was it truly a lucky guess that tragically backfired on Diane? John never elaborated beyond that terse, painful confession. In the end, the tale of John and Diane Kramer stands as one of the most twisted love triangle cold cases in modern crime law. A story where victim and perpetrator traded places in mid-air, where fate or cunning dealt a cruel hand. It's a case that forces us to ponder the dark extremes of betrayal and the thin line between justice and revenge. Diane's lover Michael, who moved away and started a new life, said upon hearing John's interview, "I guess she got what she planned for him. But none of us really got away unscathed, did we?" John lives out his quiet days carrying the weight of that fateful decision every single day. In Maple Falls, locals still discuss the case in low, uneasy tones. The old airfield has since closed, but people say that on crisp October afternoons you can sometimes hear a phantom echo of a distant scream from the sky. Perhaps it's a reminder that evil acts often come full circle, and that the truth, no matter how deeply buried, will eventually make itself known, one way or another. In the end, the anniversary jump wasn't an accident. It was a deadly plan turned on its own maker. Whether it was fate, instinct, or calculated self-preservation, the truth plummeted to earth with Diane that day. Some secrets are buried in the sky, but their echoes never really fade. In love and in life, sometimes the fall is faster than you think.
Every story has an end, but here, the mysteries never stop. Thank you for watching and being a part of this journey into the unknown. Your support keeps these stories alive, and there's plenty more waiting for you. We drop 3 new stories every week, so if you crave suspense, the unexplained, and the downright chilling, make sure you're subscribed and ready for what's next. Until then, keep your lights on, your doors locked, and remember, some stories stay with you long after they're told.